Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 21st, 2014 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my distinct pleasure to call this meeting to order. There are copies of our agenda on either side of the room. If you haven't already done so, please feel free to pick one up and you can follow along with our proceedings tonight. We will have multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items that are on our agenda tonight, as well as a segment under item 4, which is designated for questions and comments of a general nature with respect to items that are not appearing on our agenda tonight. It is our proud custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, so I would invite everyone here to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to now ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Rankin? Commissioner Barnett? Commissioner Neustadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. Brings us to item 3, pertains to minutes of council meetings. We have some to review and approve tonight. Those are our budget meeting minutes from October 11th, 2014, as well as our regular council meeting minutes from October 14th, 2014. Do any members of the village council have any questions, comments, changes, or corrections to any of those minutes? Or either of those minutes, excuse me. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. And very good, we are at item 4 already. Public comments of a general nature. If any members of the audience have any questions or comments of a general nature with respect to items not appearing on our agenda tonight, now would be the time to please come down to the podium, introduce yourself, and we welcome hearing from you. Good evening.
Good evening. Back again. My name is Bob Peterson. I live at 6861 Camden Road, Downers Grove. And I also own Leibenguth Moving and Storage in Downers Grove on Warren Avenue. And good evening, everybody. And I kind of picked the wrong night because Becky's not here tonight, so. But anyway, businesses starting up anywhere in any community need 3 things: location, location, location. And the 3 things that go along with that are location of signs. Once again, the locations. People passing through the area look for information of what's going on in the town. I've noticed recently that the signs at Station 3 and Station 5 have been removed, which I think was a mistake because that's information giving the community from out of town going through town to understand what's going on. There's a craft show, there's a fair, or there's something going on in the community that they may be going from Lombard down to Lamont, and they're going through, oh, let's stop at the craft show, let's stop and see what's there, or let's go to the farmer's market. No signs, no business, no profit. That was, I think, in my opinion, a bad mistake. I think the sign ordinance does have to have a thorough look at it, not only from my standpoint, but maybe whoever is left in the situation where it's causing them business problems. I know I just told Greg over here that Teddy's Red Hots, within 30 days after removing his sign, he noticed a drop in business. That's not good. We're supposed to be business friendly. We're supposed to be helping the community to grow, and you can't grow unless you have a business that can thrive. And if you can't thrive, the tax dollars that are lost. Also, the signs should have been more of a thoughtful way of displaying a sign, not just the size that's there, because you have businesses that are 2, 3, 4, 500 feet away from any traffic, and the size of the sign means a lot. Yes, the sign on the back of my building is 40 feet long, 10 feet high, and it's less than half the size when viewed from the railroad. So you can't see it. If it's any smaller, it's not going to do too much good. It might be some, but I doubt it. Well, I think that's about it. I'm just trying to, once again, survive as a small business in Downers and maybe help somebody else along the line that's still in the same position I am. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. And as you probably have picked up from last couple of meetings, there are some differences of opinion with respect to the current sign ordinance, but two things I want to mention. One, just going back historically with respect to the sign ordinance, when it was first put together, it did receive a fair amount of careful consideration. I think the process back then was in 2004, 2003, maybe even earlier. There were at least a year's worth of meetings and discussion, inclusion of public, the businesses, downtown management. Then, before it even got to the village council, it went through the zoning board of appeals or the plan commission. There was a joint strategic planning committee that worked on it for a long time, that had members of both the zoning board of appeals as well as the plan commission, if I remember correctly. And so I know at the time, there was a lot of thought given to it. Now, that doesn't mean that everything was gotten just right. In fact, I think even the authors or the principal work, the people who did the principal work on all that research would tell you that they probably didn't get everything perfect. But I know that it was well-intentioned, they spent a lot of time on it before it was adopted. Now, of course, that was some time ago. It was over a decade ago. And I
Right.
think last time you were here, you mentioned things change, times changed, and you have to change with them and hopefully change ahead of them. So I don't think anybody also disagrees that at some point in time, the sign ordinance does need to be revisited. It's no different than what we do with our zoning ordinance, our building code, or anything else for that matter, is periodically it deserves to be revisited. I think it's more of a question of what needs to be revisited and on what timetable. My current understanding is that there will be a point in time, probably not for an immediate future, where we will, after collecting a number of different issues that have been identified with respect to the experience of the last decade with the ordinance, what things might be considered. But I think there is something, has been noted by some of my colleagues in the past, that there is a process that's in place that does have to come to some conclusion first.
Right. Some of the things that I've been hearing, though, and I get around town a lot. I'm here in town, I do business in town, out of town. But some of the comments that I've had from some of the owners of the store was that when they first started with some of these interviews or meetings about the ordinance of signs, they were allowed to go to the meeting, but they weren't allowed to speak. What good's the meeting if you can't put input into what you want? And as I was said in my statement over here, is that signs could have been adjusted from a way of how far away you are. If you're 300, 400, 500 feet away from the street, how can you see a sign that's only 2 feet by 3 feet? You got to use binoculars, and you pass the place up. And I'm hearing this up and down Ogden Avenue, going past, and all of a sudden, oh, welcome to Lyle, welcome to Westmont. Well, where's Car X? We passed it. Well, let's turn around and go back, because the signs are too small. So, thank you.
Sure, sure. And I do know that a lot of other communities were looked at, and I remember there was, just to put it all in perspective, because I may be the only person that was here at the time, but I remember comments on the other side that people knew when they were in Downers Grove because of how tawdry the signage looked. And why couldn't we look more like Naperville with their more neat, smaller signs? So it's just interesting how times change and opinions change. But I think, number one, there was a lot of careful thought put into it. Number two, nobody thought it was perfect, and it always was going to be revisited at some point in time anyway, and periodically changes can be made. But number three, the process has been enormously successful to date. And four, there will be a point when I think that universally it will be revisited, probably not tomorrow, probably not for a while, but at some reasonable point. But certainly, it's one of those things that reasonable people can disagree on in terms of what's appropriate signage for where and how and when. But that's why we have a lot of input from a lot of different people before making decisions, and that's why we maintain the flexibility to make changes where it makes sense to do so. And sometimes changes are made, and sometimes they're not. We've had different requests over time to make some changes. Some have, and some haven't. You witnessed one just a couple weeks ago, where there was an attempt that was made to visit a text amendment to the ordinance, and it didn't proceed at this point in time. Who knows? But anyway, appreciate you coming down, appreciate your comments, and obviously we understand that it's a ongoing issue of importance to the business community and beyond. Thank you. Other questions or comments of a general nature from members of the audience? And Dr. Goodman, I deliberately kept talking long enough just so I could make sure you got here.
I'm starting to wonder that myself.
We make a pretty good team. I'm Gordon Goodman. I live at 5834 Midoff. And I wanted to ask if there was any progress on Commissioner Barnett's thoughts last week about downsizing or right-sizing services. I was very struck by that as a thought on the future of the village. It seems to, if I understand the implications of it, run contrary to what I've been trying to bring to the council over these years. I see Commissioner Barnett is not here today, but I'll pursue this question later unless there is some status report on his suggestion in the new business section of the last meeting.
Yeah, he's not here tonight to further explain himself, but I do not expect it to be something we'll be discussing tonight, and I don't think anything has been done of consequence since he raised it. I think he was raising it way, way, way ahead of time for possible consideration, but I also think it's something that would require a fair amount of information to be provided in order to even consider the concept. And my understanding is, unless somebody corrects me, is that right now it's a concept for exploration, but that would have to take place in the context of a great deal of information that would be provided at a future point in time. And I know that doesn't sound like much of an answer. The short answer is I don't believe any progress has been made in the week or two since it was first brought up, by design, if that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. That clarifies the status of the suggestion. And
Bless you.
I'll sit down now. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't mean to make you come all the way back up. Any other questions or comments from members of the audience? All right, very good. Well, thank you for those. Thank you for coming out. That brings us to item 5, council member reports. This is an opportunity for members of the council to share with the public and the audience items of interest and goings-on in the community. I'll start with Commissioner Jose tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Just another reminder that early voting is available Monday through Friday here at Village Hall between 8:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. and on Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Through Saturday, November the 1st. And if you stop in there and cast your ballot, you get a nice little sticker like this one. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. And I hear the traffic has been robust since early voting started.
That's what I understand.
Thank you. Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just want to remind everyone that there's only 9 Fridays left until the Christmas Day. So if you haven't started your holiday shopping, please remember the Village of Downers Grove to do your shopping in, because every bit of sales tax revenue that you bring in or you provide to this to our village only helps with our operating costs. So thank you.
9 Fridays?
9 Fridays.
That's very alarming news.
Yeah, there's only, 6 meetings until the end of the year too, which is kind of hard to believe as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Olson.
As a follow-up to what Commissioner Jose had to say, if you don't get a chance to early vote at any of those very convenient times at Village Hall, Election Day is November 4th. Polls open 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Your normal polling place should have gotten a card from DuPage County Election Commission. So hope everyone exercises their franchise and gets out and votes this election. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Neustadt.
Thank you, Mayor. Some exciting news today in our environmentally friendliness at our village. The Village of Downers Grove has been selected the second government green fleet in North America. Each year, the Government Green Fleet Award recognizes the top 100 fleets. Last year, we were ranked 14th, but due to our addition of 10 new Chevy Tahoes that were converted from traditional fuel to natural gas, we moved up in the ranking. It's a great example of how our organization does everything we can to not only benefit our environment, but to just do the right thing. Another great award for our organization that's felt in every department, it looks like, from sedans to, let me see here, 5-ton trucks to biodiesel, ethanol, compressed. I mean, we have just a great selection of environmentally friendly fuels and vehicles here in the village. Congratulations to everybody who had anything to do with that. Also this weekend, lots of great events in town. A great place to check website is the Downtown Management website to find out about events like the HG&A Annual Pancake Breakfast this Saturday, I believe, from 8 a.m. until it usually goes to about 11 or noon at Ballydoyle. It's a great event. And after you eat your pancakes, you can head outside for the Rotary Club of Downers Grove's annual window painting. It's another tradition unlike any other in Downers Grove, and we are very fortunate to have such great community events here in Downers Grove. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just to pick up on that, the fleet is a highlight of tours that are taken by our representatives in Washington when they come to tour Downers Grove. They always want to see the green fleet and are often blown away by the innovative use of alternative fuels and other technologies, not just with respect to vehicles, but also the street lights that we have. They're solar powered and wind powered, and also the other solar panels. I've noticed that there are multiple representatives from Washington will make a point of touring that when they come here. So it's something that we're nice to see ongoing recognition for that. And as Commissioner Neustadt pointed out, don't miss Spooktacular Weekend in downtown Downers Grove. There are events that are happening Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, in addition to the Helping Girls Navigate Adolescence Pancake Breakfast that is taking place at Ballet Dwell on Saturday morning. Obviously, that's being done in the middle of the window painting. There's a living cemetery activity going on later that day. Before that, on Friday the 24th, Main Street Cemetery at Night for Families is being presented by the Downers Grove Park District. That event's going on from 7 until 8 p.m. The Park District is also sponsoring a suburban horror story evening at the Lincoln Center. That's actually happening on the 24th and the 25th. So if you're ready for some scares, that's a good place to go. And then on Sunday, of course, Commissioner Durkin would want to point out that the Downers Grove Lions Club is doing their annual Halloween costume parade. That's on the 26th. That kicks off at 1 o'clock. And then there will be safe trick-or-treating at Downtown Merchants after the costume parade, which ends at 3 o'clock. And since we won't have another meeting beforehand, just want to make sure that everybody's safe out there with respect to trick-or-treating. One thing that is really cool, if I might digress just for a second, he's going to kick me. You're familiar?
Packers?
No, I'm going to kick you. Although, you know what, I'm about to give up on the hometown team after that game with Miami. You're familiar with that app, or the website Neighbors?
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have a function on there where it will, you can sign up for a path on trick-or-treating.
Yeah,
So
that's
if
right.
you remember that you can actually, and then it'll generate a map for trick-or-treating
Yeah.
within your neighborhood. That's
Right.
pretty cool.
Yeah, because you're actually being surveyed if you're gonna be participating.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was a great idea.
So parents can actually print out a little map of their neighborhood and know what houses to go to
Right.
before they even head out. That's kind of neat. At any rate, I don't know who makes that application, and they did not pay me for that little endorsement.
No, but it is cool, though.
It is kind of cool. But the point of that was, there are lots of ways to engage in safe trick-or-treating, and obviously we encourage everyone to do so.
And the mayor is giving out the full-size Snickers.
Who told you?
The app.
Who told you? Who told you? Thank you. That brings us to item 6 on our agenda, which is reserved for public hearings. We have no public hearings tonight, so that will bring us right to item 7, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda? Questions or comments from members of the village council for respect to any items on the consent agenda? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Jose? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, the consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to item 8, our active agenda. We have one item on our active agenda tonight. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance that would repeal the Community Grants Commission?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from members of the audience on this item? We do have audience comments. Welcome
Good
back.
evening again, Mayor and Commissioners, staff. I'm Gordon Goodman. I live at 5834 Midoff, and I want to express my opinion that this is moving the village in the wrong direction, and I'm hoping that you will look for opportunities, as Commissioner Jose suggested when we first began discussing this ordinance, to provide services such as support for the Meals on Wheels and other support that the DuPage Senior Center lends to members of our community. There are other programs, I won't enumerate them, that benefited from the village support before the Great Recession, as they're calling it now. And as you look at the activities of the village, I hope you will realize that supporting these things is in the best interests of the community and appropriate role for the village acting through its elected leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the council? Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. I do think that it is a little disappointing that this is going away, but on another level, we have many demonstrable needs in the community that I think have to take precedence. And as a result, I do support the elimination of Community Grants Commission with the understanding that these kinds of decisions can always be revisited. But when you've got stormwater problems, when you have facility needs, when you have any number of other needs here in the community that I think are more to the essence of what it is that the village government must do and should do at the highest level. This is something that I think is an unfortunate cut, but I think it's a necessary one. So I do support it, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments, members of the council? I certainly understand the reasoning behind defunding community grants and understand how it worked very well, having once upon a time been involved in chairing that board and commission. And certainly understand the words that you just shared with us, Commissioner. But on the other hand, I'm also cognizant of the fact that in these chambers recently we've spent a fair amount of time talking about the importance and the value to the community of not-for-profits in a different context, and we don't seem to be having the same conversation here. That troubles me. Also, in the context of economic development, we often use public dollars to try to spur private development in the private sector, as long as we do so smartly and in a way that is going to return more on the investment than what we put in on it. And that's not always easy to do, but I think it can be done and has been very successful. And it is one thing where you don't do it for everybody. They have to demonstrate that they meet certain criteria, and that was something that the Community Grants Commission was set up to do. So I think there are other things that we are doing or are talking about doing right now that, if taken to the next step, would support maintaining community grants, perhaps reworking it, which is another thing that I think that would be worth our time and effort, is to, if there are certain concerns about it or how it works, that it could be reworked into perhaps something that would be more successful and more in alignment with other things that we are vocally in support of here as a council. So at the end of the day, while I certainly understand the reasons, and this is a classic example of something where reasonable people can differ, I can't support this at this time. So with that, I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Nay. Motion passes 4-1. Brings us to the end of our active agenda and to item 9, our first reading or our workshop agenda, where we entertain items for discussion and consideration only, and they will, if at all, be entertained for formal action at a later point in time. We have 2 items on our first reading or workshop agenda tonight, items 9A and B. B in particular is one that we've seen before, but as is customary, I'll ask our village manager, David Fieldman, to please introduce these items, or introduce another member of our fine staff to introduce these items.
I will
Mr.
be,
Fieldman.
thank you, Mayor. I will be introducing our Planning Division Manager, Stan Popovich, who will present the first item, which is consideration of an ordinance for a special use on Ogden Avenue.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Fieldman. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The item before you tonight is regarding the Neptune Society proposal for a special use at 1628 Ogden Avenue. 1628 Ogden Avenue here is in the northwest quadrant of the village on Ogden Avenue, east of Finley Road. If we zoom in a little bit more, it's between Lee Avenue and Downers Drive. The landmark that's probably most easily identifiable is the existing McDonald's on the 2 buildings to the east of the proposed project location. This is the project site here at 1628 Ogden Avenue. It currently is a vacant building, approximately 5,000 square feet in size. with parking in front of the building and then a few parking spaces in the rear of the building. So the petitioner is requesting the Neptune Society as a funeral services business, as we classify them in the zoning ordinance. It's more or less a professional sales office, but funeral services in the zoning ordinance is defined as any service related to the death of humans. So since this is a business that relates to the death of humans, it comes in under a funeral services business. As I wanted to just point out, explain why it's a funeral services business, the services that they primarily provide is a professional sales office, consultation for cremation services with loved ones and the folks who are setting up their own services after their passing. Services that they do not provide, which you'll typically find in a funeral home, are embalming, cremation, transportation of human remains, and memorial services. So while this is identified as a funeral services business, some of the traditional services that you see with the funeral business are not provided at this location. All cremation would occur off-site at other facilities. The only human remains that would be on site would be as if a loved one comes to collect their loved one for burial or I'll just leave it at burial because I don't know what else people do with remains. But this is the floor plan that they're proposing right now. It's a vacant site, a vacant interior building. They've split it up a little bit into some sales offices. Primarily the folks go out for sales calls, but sometimes people will come in to make arrangements or to pick up a loved one's remains. Exterior improvements, this is the proposed site plan. They're going to add some green space here you see on the south, closest to Ogden Avenue, which will be a nice addition there. It's primarily paving right now. We'll add some new parking in the front and some better striped parking in the rear of the facility, which will meet our zoning ordinance requirements. And then also they'll provide a trash enclosure at the rear of the property there as well. So any trash that the office generates will be in the trash enclosure there and come for regular pickup. The project is compliant with the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan. The zoning ordinance, they do meet our parking requirements. They are going to decrease the net nonconformity in green space, as the addition of green space up front is better for the green space area and the space requirements. And it's moving it from the back, where there's a little section right now, up to the front, where it's more visible along Ogden Avenue. They will still provide screening to the adjacent neighbors to the north, though, as well. And then with regard to the comprehensive plan, it's within the corridor commercial designation. It's a proposed professional office along Ogden Avenue, which is one of the items in the corridor commercial categorization. And it also modernizes an existing building, a vacant building, and modernizes the site a little bit as well. So if there are any questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
Thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions from any members of the audience with respect to this item at this time? Questions from members of the Village Council? Commissioner Durkin.
Just a point of clarification. Can you explain a little more detail, or again, why there's a special use for this facility? If none of the traditional services are being provided, funeral home services, to me, it's just a sales office. So why is it that we have to have them? I mean, they comply with everything. I should have asked this earlier, but it didn't dawn on me.
It's simply because the wording of our zoning ordinance says any use related to funeral services.
Even though it's a sales culture.
Correct.
Interesting. That's all I have. I appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments, members of the council? Just a couple, and I was looking as you were talking. The special use as proposed will include the fact that the activities that you previously indicated, Mr. Popovich, will not be taking place in the site, such that if there was a change later on to provide those services, they would need to come back in for an amendment of the special use. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. That being said, certainly looking at the standards for approval of special uses under 28.12.050 of our ordinance, it is something that meets those criteria in all four subcategories of that particular section that I just read, and will not reflect any detriment to the neighborhood, particularly in that corridor. And I would note, and I think it bears repeating, that the proposed use is actually going to be more compliant with the requirements of our code than the current use in terms of some of the setbacks, minimum open space, and parking, as you mentioned. So actually, it's less detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing use. So for all those reasons, I can't imagine not supporting the approval of this special use as defined here tonight and in the documents. Any other questions from the audience or members of the council? Bless you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is further opportunity for dialogue among the council, the staff, and the community about the proposed FY15 budget. The budget was published in late September. We've spoken about it on a couple of different occasions, including a in-depth discussion a couple Saturdays ago. Staff does not have any further presentation of this item, but we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. And just to reiterate, this would now be the fourth time that we have had a public meeting with respect to the proposed fiscal 2015 budget. The first being at a 3.5, almost 4-hour meeting that we had over at Fire Station 2. It was on a Saturday morning. Then we had an opportunity for further discussion here at last week's council meeting. There was also a coffee with the council, again on Saturday morning from 9 until 10 at Fire Station 2 that was open to the public for any input or discussion or comments with respect to the budget. This will be our fourth meeting about the budget, and then I don't know if we have the timetable slide readily available. I know I'm looking at it, but there will still be a number of opportunities for further discussion of the budget before it gets adopted. Looks like the next one will be Tuesday, November 4th, and then we have the levy conversation on November 11th. We're not actually slated to adopt the budget by vote until November 11th. So there are plenty more opportunities for public input, comment, or discussion of the budget, so just want to let everyone know that. That being said, I'll start with whether there are any questions or comments with respect to the proposed fiscal 2015 budget from any members of the audience, and then turn it back to members of the council. Dr. Goodman.
Good evening again. I'd like to explore a little more about the forestry program. One of the things that has been accomplished in this budget is to set aside and identify funds for the eradication and replanting of trees that suffer from the emerald ash borer. In the capital projects, we have line 18 that provides $261,300 for emerald ash borer eradication, but I understand that also includes planting to replace the trees that have to be removed. In the Public Works budget, we've normally had the forestry program entirely included there. And this budget seems a little ambiguous about how much additional tree pruning, removal, and planting of the traditional sort that we've included in our forestry program would be in the Public Works budget. And I'm asking, where would I find that detailed information about the forestry program in the Public Works budget?
We can highlight that, not only for Dr. Goodman, but for everybody else. We'll put some information on the website, and we'll come back next time we meet and have the line item for you on that. It is a net increase, which I've spoken to Dr. Goodman about, but we will point out exactly where you can find that and how those dollars would be used.
Yes, thank you very much.
Sure, and to be specific, the question was, obviously, there are some dollars for new plantings that are part of the emerald ash section of the budget, which is there, but you're asking about beyond that, what would be the plantings and trimmings and et cetera that would be of the normal course outside of the emerald ash issue?
The other detail that I'd like to see is what the estimated breakdown for the line 18
Right.
Capital budget is
Right.
as far as removal and replanting.
Removal, replanting, and trimming as well.
Whatever
Correct.
else
Understood.
is now included in that capital item.
We can certainly provide that breakdown, and we'll do so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the proposed fiscal 2015 budget from members of the audience? Please, sir.
A quick count.
And I apologize if this is in the wrong spot or this is not part of the budget. I have not taken a look at it. It kind of deals with what I've been reading, the water tax and, the water. Stormwater fees, yes, as opposed to having that in a tax. If it is not part of the budget, from where I stand in life, I would prefer to see, as opposed to the water utility surcharge that's, part of our water bill now, that is not deductible on our state and federal income tax, move back to the property tax, I guess, or a different taxing way of putting that to us so that I can deduct it on my taxes. Where I stand in tax brackets, as we continue to move forward, it costs me money, even though I pay a lower rate for, say, or what looks like a low rate on my usage bill, let's say, so let's say where when we were taxed on property taxes, that was $120, we'll say, for what we pay for stormwater. You dropped it down with the usage fee to $100. But because of my tax bracket, it ends up costing me more. I cannot deduct this. I would like you to just please take a look at redoing that and moving it back that way as opposed to where it currently is. Hopefully I made myself clear.
Oh, you made yourself.
I'm not very good with that.
No, you did just fine. You made yourself very clear, and it is something that was discussed before the stormwater utility was adopted. It is one of the drawbacks to a stormwater utility in that by having a fee that's charges people based roughly on the amount of runoff from their property, it is not treated currently by the federal and state government as something that you can deduct from your gross income, and therefore that is one of the downsides of it. The thing to think about, though, is over the long term, if we continue to finance stormwater on property taxes, what was existing was a disparity between residential property owners, single-family residential property owners in the community who were paying about 70% of the total stormwater cost of infrastructure and management and maintenance, and yet we're only generating about 50% of the runoff. And the more you put onto the property tax, the more that disparity grows. So pretty soon, single-family residents, property owners like yourself, are maybe paying 80% of the burden, and yet you're only generating 45% of the runoff. It didn't seem to be very fair. So in the long run, over 15, 20 years, you might actually be paying more under a property tax, even with the deduction. Now, I haven't calculated that out, but that was one of the reasons to look at that, because the connection between a property value, the amount of stormwater runoff it generates, is zero. There's no connection whatsoever. So instead, it's being treated more like water. You might think of it as stormwater is the water that comes down, the drinking water is what goes out, and you don't pay for drinking water with your property taxes either, because that would make no sense. However, your point is well understood. It is clearly one of the downsides of choosing a stormwater utility as a method for paying for stormwater maintenance infrastructure, and candidly, there are two different opinions on that point, no question about it. Long-term, though, it may be you're better off this way. But again, I haven't sat down because I don't know your tax bracket, I don't have your financials, nor do I want them to be able to figure that out. But that is one of the problems with putting everything on the property tax bill. I also had a few people come to me and say, well, just because we could deduct a portion of it, that means I still don't want you to raise my property taxes.
I understand.
I know you're not going to be saying that.
You have to pay for these things. I just look for, it's straight up dollars. What's cheapest for me? And right now, it's cheaper if I could deduct it.
And that may be true in the short run. I'm not so sure that's necessarily true in the long run. The other advantage of a utility is that it spreads the cost over more payers, and it's more tied to the people who are generating the runoff, or the properties, not the people, the properties that are generating the runoff. So like with water, the more water you utilize, the more you pay for it. And it's not exactly that precise. We don't have meters on your lawn actually measuring droplets. But we do try to measure through calculating impermeable area, an approximation by proxy of what the runoff would be. And so it's more tied to the amount of runoff that's generated. The idea being that properties that generate more runoff will pay more than properties that generate less runoff. The value of your property has nothing to do with how much stormwater you generate.
No, I understand those things.
But your point is well taken, and you'll get no argument from me or anyone else that the inability to treat that fee the same as you would a property tax is one of the downsides.
If you could find a way to make the fee deductible, I'm all good with it. But
Understood.
the way it is right now, it hurts just a tad bit.
I understand,
Thank
sir.
you very much for your time.
We will have some calculations on that on November 4th.
Sure.
To show the impacts.
Well, and sir, and you don't have to say this to the microphone, but if you want to give us your name and address, we might even be able to give you some calculations as to your property in particular.
No problem.
But you don't have to give it at the microphone if you don't want to.
Oh, sorry. It's Tom Carson, Chairman of the
But
Mayor, could I comment on that?
I was going to thank him, and then yes. But thank you for coming here tonight and participating in the conversation. Commissioner?
Oh, I know we're going to get some additional information on this next week, or in 2 weeks. So I look forward to discussing it further at that time, but, just do want to note, I think that I strongly sympathize with the argument that was just made at the mic. And also want to note that while there's some ways that it's more fair, it's also, there's a lot of unfairness in the current system as well, given certain areas of town don't drain into any of the watersheds that are maintained by the Village of Downers Grove. I think about the Nottingham subdivision at the very southeast portion of town that is much more tied into Darien and their systems. So, those folks are paying for fees into a system that they're effectively not using or not using very much of. So, just wanted to note that there are, certainly plenty of issues in regard to fairness, quote unquote, with this that that the stormwater utility does not address. So, just wanted to note that and look forward to having some more discussion.
And actually, I would say that a little bit differently, because one of the advantages of the utility is that it actually has the flexibility to be able to address those kind of situations through credits and other things of that nature. Whereas with a property tax, in that situation, you'd just be paying the property tax. You couldn't go for any kind of adjustment in your property tax because your water was draining off into a neighboring community. There'd be no ability to even approach that issue. At least with the utility, because of the tie to impervious area, where there are situations of demonstrating, I'm not saying that instance in particular, but where folks have taken steps to reduce stormwater management costs or stormwater runoff on their own properties, there are at least some opportunities to pursue credits and partnership credits and things of that nature, which that flexibility does not exist under a property tax system. So it's more egalitarian in that respect.
Yes. Could I ask staff in the report next week to include some discussion when we approve, for example, these new subdivisions, like we approved the Atwood Court subdivision recently, where there was detention that was on site, and we have a special service area in case the homeowners association fails to maintain that detention. How that impacts their stormwater utility fee, if at all?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Further questions or comments from the audience? Good evening, Mr. LeCrun.
Mayor, Council, staff. Tom LeCrun, 545 Chicago Avenue. With respect to the real estate tax versus the fee and being able to deduct it, not everybody can make itemized deductions. I can't, and therefore, if it went back to the real estate tax, I'd be paying a lot more than the fee is, or at least that's what I believe. So just get that point out there. People that want to go back to property taxes are those that can deduct. What about us folks that can't deduct? Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments on the budget from members of the council? And I wouldn't take the fact that no one has any questions or comments as anything more than we have had this conversation for some time, and this is a long process, and we're probably, I would guess, 3/5 of the way through it in terms of the meetings and conversations and public input that led to the creation, actually to the planning documents that then led in turn to the budget documents. So the council's had a long period of time of conversing and discussing about the various aspects that make up the proposed fiscal 2015 budget. So if there are no further comments from my colleagues at this point in time,
That will end our first reading.
that will end our
Thank you.
first reading. Very good. Well, that brings us to item 10, the mayor's report. I have no report tonight, so that brings us right to item 11, the manager's report. Mr. Fieldman?
No report tonight, Mayor.
Very good. Item 12, Madam Attorney.
Thank
Ms.
you, Mayor.
Petrarca.
Only one item to present tonight, and that is an ordinance authorizing a special use to permit a funeral service business at 1628 Ogden Avenue. That is all, Mayor. That will be on the November 4th active agenda.
Thank you very much. And it is October and it's almost Halloween, so item 13. Do any members of the village council have any items of new business that they want to raise with the rest of the council at this point in time? All right, hearing none, we'll come to item 14, which is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, we are adjourned and wish everyone a safe and happy Halloween. Thank you.